Hey guys, tonight we're exploring a story that everyone in history should know. The story is how American families survived lost winter roads. You get comfortable. Take a moment, like the video, and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. How American families survived lost winter. Roads. Imagine a quiet winter evening settling over the American countryside nearly 2 centuries ago. The daylight has already begun to fade, although the afternoon did not seem very long to begin with. Snowflakes drift slowly through the cold air, each one finding its place upon fields, fences, rooftops, and the narrow road that connects one family to another. Before long, the familiar path almost disappears beneath a soft white blanket. You find yourself standing beside a modest wooden farmhouse. Smoke rises gently from a stone chimney, climbing into the pale gray sky before fading into the stillness. The scent of burning oak and maple drifts through the frosty air. Somewhere nearby, a horse quietly stamps its feet inside a small barn, trying to keep warm. Chickens have already settled into their coop, while a faithful farm dog curls close to the doorway where a little warmth escapes each time it opens. The family inside understands something that every generation before them has learned through experience. Winter is not only a season, it is a visitor that asks every household the same quiet question. Are you ready? Picture yourself opening the heavy wooden door for only a moment. Cold air slips inside immediately, carrying tiny crystals of snow that sparkle briefly in the firelight before melting onto the floorboards. The door closes again, and the warmth slowly returns. Outside, the road leading toward the nearest village has almost vanished. To someone living today, a missing road might sound impossible. Modern snowplows, weather forecasts, and heated vehicles have changed the meaning of winter travel. But for many American families during the 18th and 19th centuries, losing sight of a road was not unusual at all. Sometimes the snow covered every landmark. Sometimes strong winds erased wagon tracks only minutes after they were made. Sometimes fences disappeared beneath deep drifts, leaving fields and roads looking exactly alike. Yet families continued living, children continued growing, neighbors continued helping one another. And somehow, communities endured winters that often lasted for months. As the evening becomes quieter, imagine sitting beside the family's fireplace. The room is simple but comfortable. Thick wooden beams support the ceiling above. Iron cooking pots hang nearby, gently warming after the day's meal. A handmade quilt covers the bed tucked into one corner. Every object has a purpose. Nothing has been collected simply for decoration. Winter teaches careful choices. Every log burned tonight will not be available tomorrow. Every candle must last. Every meal matters. The people gathered here understand these things without speaking about them very often. Their knowledge has been shaped by many winters before this one. Long before roads were carefully maintained by local governments, families accepted that nature often decided when travel would stop. Roads in rural America were usually little more than packed earth. During spring, they became muddy. During summer, they filled with dust. During autumn, they softened beneath rain, and during winter, they quietly disappeared beneath snow. No sign announced that the road had ended. The snow simply erased it. Imagine waking before sunrise after several days of heavy snowfall. The silence outside feels almost complete. Fresh snow has a remarkable way of absorbing sound, making the world seem softer than usual. Even the distant forest seems to whisper instead of speak. The father opens the front door slowly. He studies the landscape. Yesterday's wagon tracks are gone. The path toward town cannot be seen. Even the fence posts appear shorter because snow has piled around them. For a few moments, he simply watches. There is no frustration, only quiet observation. Experience has taught him that hurrying rarely helps in winter. The family does not immediately think about traveling. Instead, they begin thinking about staying. That single difference shaped much of early American winter life. Preparing to remain home for weeks was often more important than preparing to leave. Months earlier, while warm sunshine still filled the fields, everyone had already begun gathering supplies. Wood was stacked higher than anyone thought necessary. Vegetables were stored inside cool root cellars beneath the house. Corn had been dried. Beans had been carefully saved. Apples rested inside barrels. Salted meat waited inside smokehouses. Nothing about these preparations happened quickly. Each season quietly prepared the family for the next. Summer worked for winter. Autumn finished what summer began. Winter simply revealed whether those preparations had been enough. Picture yourself walking carefully into the family's root cellar. The air changes immediately. It feels cooler. Earth surrounds the small room on every side. Shelves hold potatoes, carrots, onions, turnips, and jars carefully preserved months ago. This underground space becomes one of the home's greatest treasures once snow blocks the roads. No merchant is expected to arrive. No weekly market can be guaranteed. Everything stored here represents security earned through patience. As morning slowly arrives, the children begin their own simple chores. One child carries wood toward the fireplace. Another checks water kept from freezing indoors. An older brother pulls on heavy boots before walking toward the barn. Snow crunches beneath every careful step. The animals also depend upon preparation. Hay stored during summer now becomes their food. Fresh water must be carried despite freezing temperatures. The horses especially remain important. Although wagons may not travel today, horses still help with many daily tasks around the farm. Sometimes they pull sleds instead of wagons. A sled glides more smoothly across packed snow than wooden wheels ever could. In fact, some communities welcomed deep snow because sled travel became easier than muddy autumn roads had been. Winter often created new roads instead of destroying them. Frozen rivers occasionally became temporary highways. Snow-covered fields sometimes served as shortcuts, but only experienced travelers knew when such routes were safe. Knowledge passed quietly between neighbors could save lives. Imagine an older farmer explaining the winter landscape to his son. He points not toward the road because it cannot be seen. Instead, he points toward familiar trees, toward a rocky hill, toward the shape of distant woods, toward the church steeple barely visible across open land. These landmarks remain even when roads disappear. Generations learned to navigate by memory long before printed maps became common possessions. The land itself became their guide. As afternoon approaches, gentle snow begins falling once more. The flakes seem harmless. Each one lands almost silently. But hour after hour, they slowly reshape the countryside again. Nature rarely hurries. Its greatest changes often happen quietly. Inside the farmhouse, conversation remains gentle. Perhaps someone mends clothing beside the fire. Perhaps another family member carefully carves a wooden spoon that will be used for years. Grandparents tell stories remembered from childhood. These stories carry more than entertainment. They preserve knowledge. Which winter was the coldest? Which stream froze first? Which neighbor always shared extra grain? Which path through the forest remained safest after heavy snowfall? History often survived through voices before it reached books. Children listened because one day they would become the adults responsible for remembering. Outside, the wind slowly strengthens. Snow begins drifting against fences. Small hills become larger. Gates nearly disappear. The world grows simpler in appearance, painted almost entirely in white and gray. Yet beneath that peaceful surface lies careful planning, quiet endurance, and generations of practical wisdom. No family believed they could conquer winter. Instead, they learned something gentler. They learned how to live alongside it. As evening settles once again across the snowy countryside, warm firelight glows through the farmhouse windows. Somewhere beyond the frozen fields, another family is lighting their own hearth, checking their own food stores, and listening to the same winter wind passing through leafless trees. Though separated by miles of snow-covered land, they share many of the same hopes for the long season ahead. Tonight, the roads may have vanished from sight. But tomorrow, we will quietly discover how neighbors found one another even when every familiar path seemed to disappear beneath the endless white. The morning arrives without hurry. The first light of day spreads softly across the snow, turning the fields into a quiet sea of pale silver. The farmhouse still rests beneath a thick blanket of white, and smoke once again rises from the chimney in a slow, steady ribbon. Inside, the family has already begun another winter day, following routines that have become as familiar as breathing. Imagine waking beneath several heavy quilts, stitched by careful hands years before. The room is cool, but not unbearably cold. The fire burned low during the night, and someone is already kneeling beside the hearth, placing dry pieces of oak onto glowing embers. Soon, the comforting crackle of fresh firewood fills the room. Outside, nothing seems to have changed. The road is still gone. Fresh snow has hidden every wagon track that existed only days ago. Yet life continues. You find yourself stepping outside beside the father as he pauses on the porch. He does not search for the road anymore. Instead, he studies the sky. Winter weather could often be read by careful observation. A ring around the moon the previous evening, the direction of the wind, the feel of the air against weathered skin, and even the behavior of birds offered small clues about what might come next. These signs were never perfect, but generations learned to notice patterns that modern forecasts have largely replaced. The cold air carries almost no scent except fresh snow and distant wood smoke. Somewhere beyond the trees, A crow calls only once before silence returns. The snow beneath every step makes a gentle crunch. These simple sounds become part of daily life during long American winters. Picture yourself walking toward the barn. The roof carries a heavy load of snow, but its steep design helps much of it slide away before becoming too dangerous. Early American builders often understood their local climate very well. Homes and barns were shaped not only by tradition, but also by experience. Every harsh winter taught another lesson. Inside the barn, warmth from the animals softens the chill. The horses lift their heads as the door opens. A cow breathes slowly, creating little clouds that disappear almost immediately. Hay rustles softly as it is spread across feeding racks. The animals know little about roads or snowdrifts. They simply trust the familiar rhythm of care. This relationship between families and livestock was deeply important. Without healthy horses, travel became nearly impossible once spring returned. Without cows, milk and butter became scarce. Without chickens, fresh eggs disappeared. Every animal represented security during uncertain seasons. As the chores continue, the children carry fresh water from a nearby spring. In many places, springs remained flowing even during bitter weather, though reaching them could become difficult after deep snowfall. Sometimes families broke ice every morning. Sometimes they collected snow to melt indoors. Neither task was especially pleasant, yet both became ordinary parts of winter life. Ordinary work often kept people alive more effectively than extraordinary effort. Imagine the mother preparing breakfast. A heavy iron pot hangs above the fire. Perhaps today she cooks cornmeal into a warm porridge. Perhaps slices of smoked pork are warmed beside it. Dried apples soften in simmering water. Nothing on the table appears luxurious. Yet every meal reflects months of preparation. The grain was planted in spring. The apples were gathered during autumn. The meat was preserved before freezing weather arrived. Winter meals told quiet stories about every season that came before. As everyone eats together, conversation turns toward a nearby family. No one has seen them since the last snowfall. Not because of disagreement, simply because the roads have vanished. This uncertainty was common. Families often disappeared from one another's sight for days or even weeks without causing immediate alarm. People understood that winter sometimes demanded patience. Still, neighbors rarely forgot one another. When conditions improved, visits resumed. Help was offered. News was shared. Life continued. You find yourself watching two men prepare a large wooden sled. Unlike wagons, sleds welcomed winter. Wide runners slid across packed snow with surprising ease. One horse could often pull a heavier load over snow than over muddy roads. The sled creaks gently as leather harnesses are tightened. Small iron bells hang from the harness, producing soft, pleasant sounds with every movement. Their music drifts across the frozen countryside. Long before engines filled the air with noise, these bells often announced a traveler's arrival. Imagine hearing them from inside the farmhouse. Their gentle ringing grows louder. Someone smiles. Visitors have found their way through the snow. Hospitality became especially meaningful during winter. Travel required effort. No guest arrived casually. Every visit represented determination. The neighbors removed snow-covered coats before gathering near the fire. Warm drinks are poured. Hands slowly regain feeling. Stories begin. They exchange practical information before anything else. How deep is the snow near the creek? Has anyone crossed the frozen river? Did the Miller family receive enough firewood? Has the blacksmith remained healthy? Winter conversations often centered on survival before entertainment. Useful knowledge traveled from family to family like precious cargo. Picture yourself listening quietly. There are no newspapers arriving every morning. No telephone rests upon the table. No radio fills the room. Information moves at the speed of people. When roads disappear, news slows as well. Patience becomes part of daily life. Children, meanwhile, discover that winter also offers moments of quiet joy. After chores are finished, they carve smooth paths down gentle hills using homemade sleds. Their laughter rises briefly before fading into the open fields. Snowballs fly through the cold air. Simple games leave bright memories despite difficult conditions. History often remembers hardship. It less often remembers happiness. Yet families still celebrated birthdays. Children still laughed. Parents still smiled. Even during the hardest winters, ordinary moments of comfort continue to exist. As afternoon slowly passes, clouds begin gathering once more. The father quietly checks the woodpile. It has grown smaller. Not dangerously so, but enough to remind him that winter is far from over. Firewood was measured not only by the size of the stack, but by time itself. Would it last until March? Would another cold wave arrive? Would unexpected storms demand even more? Every piece of split wood represented warmth that had been earned months earlier through long hours of labor. Imagine the family gathering again as darkness returns. The windows have become frosted with delicate patterns, resembling tiny forests made of ice. A candle flickers gently beside a worn family Bible and several treasured books. Reading aloud becomes one of the evening's quiet pleasures. Not every household owned many books. Some owned only one or two. Yet those few volumes were read many times. Stories offered comfort. Scripture offered hope. Almanacs offered practical advice. Children learned letters while listening beside the fire. Education often continued through winter evenings after the day's work had ended. Outside, the wind begins to rise again. Snow drifts across fields that no longer reveal where roads once lay. Somewhere far beyond the hills, another traveler may decide to wait until morning rather than risk becoming lost in darkness. Such decisions were wise. Many experienced Americans understood that winter rewarded patience more often than courage. The fire burns steadily lower. One by one, family members prepare for sleep. Tomorrow will likely resemble today. There will be more wood to carry, more animals to feed, more snow to watch, more quiet moments shared beside the hearth. The road may remain hidden for many days. But slowly, almost without noticing, another truth begins to appear. These families were never surviving winter alone. They depended upon memory, preparation, faith, skilled hands, loyal neighbors, and traditions carried forward through generations. And as another peaceful night settles across the sleeping countryside, a new question quietly waits with the coming dawn. When the roads disappear completely, how did travelers avoid becoming lost in a world where every field looked exactly the same? That answer will reveal itself as our journey continues. Imagine the snowfall finally coming to rest. For the first time in several days, no fresh flakes drift through the air. The clouds slowly begin to separate, allowing pale winter sunlight to reach the silent countryside. It is not a warm light, but it is welcome. It touches the roofs of farmhouses, the tops of stone walls, and the branches of sleeping maple trees, making the snow sparkle as though thousands of tiny stars have settled upon the earth. Inside the farmhouse, everyone notices the change without saying very much. The morning feels different. The storm has passed, yet the roads remain hidden. You find yourself stepping outside with the family once again. The cold is sharp enough to encourage slow, careful breaths. Each exhale becomes a small cloud that disappears almost as quickly as it forms. The silence is so complete that even the distant tapping of a woodpecker carries across the frozen fields. The father kneels near the edge of the yard and brushes away loose snow with a gloved hand. For a moment, the frozen ground appears beneath the white blanket. He nods quietly. The earth is firm. That matters. In many parts of early America, frozen ground actually made travel easier than muddy autumn roads. Once the soil hardened beneath weeks of cold weather, heavy sleds could glide across places where wagons would have struggled only months before. Winter closed some paths. It quietly opened others. Picture yourself standing beside a simple wooden sled. Unlike a wagon with its narrow wheels, the sled rests upon long wooden runners that spread its weight over the snow. Iron strips attached beneath the runners help reduce wear, while allowing smoother movement across frozen ground. The horse waits patiently. Its breath rises in soft clouds. Leather harnesses creak gently as they are adjusted. Small brass bells, polished long ago, hang beneath the collar. When the horse begins to walk, the bells produce a peaceful rhythm that carries through the crisp winter air. Those gentle sounds often became a kind of reassurance. If travelers heard distant bells, they knew someone else was nearby. In a world where snow erased roads and landmarks alike, the sound of another sled could bring quiet comfort. Imagine traveling across open country where no visible road exists. How would you know where to go? The answer was rarely found beneath your feet. Instead, it lived within memory. Families learned the landscape the way sailors learned the sea. They remembered unusual hills. They recognized lonely oak trees standing apart from the forest. They followed streams whose courses remained familiar even beneath ice. Church steeples rose above snowy fields like silent guides. Smoke from distant chimneys hinted that another home lay just beyond the next rise. Experienced travelers did not depend upon roads alone. They depended upon knowing the land itself. This knowledge was passed from one generation to the next. A father might point toward a cluster of pine trees and quietly tell his son, "When you see those trees, keep the frozen creek on your left." Such simple instructions could remain useful for decades. Maps certainly existed, but many ordinary farming families relied more upon lived experience than carefully drawn charts. You find yourself riding beside an older farmer as the sled glides across the snow. There is little conversation. The runners whisper softly over packed drifts. The horse moves with steady confidence. From time to time, The farmer studies the wind. Fresh snow blowing across the fields can quickly erase even the faintest tracks. He understands that returning home safely will require just as much attention as leaving. Imagine passing another traveler. Both sleds slow. Greetings are exchanged warmly despite the cold. Questions follow naturally. How deep is the snow near the mill? Has the bridge held? Did you hear whether the doctor reached the Thompson family? Such conversations were more than friendly exchanges. They formed a living network of information that helped entire communities survive. Without newspapers arriving quickly or telephones connecting distant homes, every traveler carried valuable news. A simple conversation beside a snowy trail could shape another family's decisions for days to come. As the morning slowly arrives in nearby villages, small groups of people begin clearing paths through the deepest drifts. Road maintenance looked very different from what we know today. Many rural communities expected local residents to help keep important routes open whenever possible. Neighbors worked together with wooden shovels, sturdy hands, and patient determination. The task required time. No machine could finish the work in an afternoon. Instead, progress came slowly, one shovel of snow after another. Picture yourself joining them. The air is cold enough to redden cheeks and numb fingers despite thick gloves. The work is steady but not rushed. Someone pauses to laugh at a friendly remark. Another offers warm cider from a small flask. The rhythm of shared labor makes the task feel lighter. Winter often reminded people that survival was rarely an individual achievement. Communities endured because people helped one another long before anyone asked for payment. As midday approaches, sunlight reflects brightly from the untouched snow. The light is beautiful, but surprisingly strong. Many experienced travelers knew that long hours spent looking across brilliant snow could tire the eyes. Wide-brimmed hats sometimes helped reduce the glare. Others simply rested their eyes whenever possible. Even small details like this became part of practical winter knowledge. Imagine stopping beside a frozen stream. Water still moves quietly beneath its thick layer of ice. The surface appears solid, but appearances could never be trusted completely. Children were taught from an early age to respect frozen water. Adults tested unfamiliar ice carefully before crossing. A stream that seemed safe 1 week might become dangerous after unexpected weather. Experience encouraged caution. The land rewarded patience. Nearby evergreen trees remain unchanged by the season. While many deciduous trees stand bare, pines, spruces, and firs continue offering shelter from the wind. Travelers often rested near these forests, where the branches softened the strongest gusts and collected less drifting snow beneath them. Nature itself provided quiet places of refuge for those who understood where to look. Back at the farmhouse, the afternoon settles into familiar routines. The mother carefully checks jars stored in the cellar. Nothing has spoiled. The cool underground air continues protecting precious food supplies. A daughter sits near the window, repairing a wool mitten with patient stitches. Every repaired garment saves valuable material. Nothing useful is wasted. Children gather small pieces of firewood dropped beside the chopping block. Even tiny scraps will help start tomorrow's fire. Winter encourages careful habits that often remain long after spring arrives. As evening approaches, clouds begin turning soft shades of lavender and pale blue. The temperature slowly falls once again. A fox crosses the distant field, leaving a delicate trail of footprints across untouched snow. Before long, fresh wind begins softening those tracks until they almost disappear. Nature quietly erases its own stories. The family gathers around the hearth after supper. The fire burns steadily. Its gentle warmth fills the room with comfort earned through months of preparation. Outside, darkness settles over fields where the roads remain hidden beneath deep snow. Yet inside this humble farmhouse, there is no feeling of hopelessness, only patience, only quiet confidence built upon experience. These families understood something that modern life sometimes allows us to forget. Not every problem must be solved immediately. Some challenges are met one careful day at a time. One fire to tend, one meal to prepare, one neighbor to help, one peaceful sunrise after another. And as the stars slowly appear above the sleeping countryside, another chapter of winter quietly waits beyond the horizon. Soon, we will discover how letters, medicine, and urgent messages still found their way across a landscape where the roads themselves had disappeared beneath the snow. Imagine the snowfall finally coming to rest. For the first time in several days, no fresh flakes drift through the air. The clouds slowly begin to separate, allowing pale winter sunlight to reach the silent countryside. It is not a warm light, but it is welcome. It touches the roofs of farmhouses, the tops of stone walls, and the branches of sleeping maple trees, making the snow sparkle as though thousands of tiny stars have settled upon the earth. Inside the farmhouse, everyone notices the change without saying very much. The morning feels different. The storm has passed, yet the roads remain hidden. You find yourself stepping outside with the family once again. The cold is sharp enough to encourage slow, careful breaths. Each exhale becomes a small cloud that disappears almost as quickly as it forms. The silence is so complete that even the distant tapping of a woodpecker carries across the frozen fields. The father kneels near the edge of the yard and brushes away loose snow with a gloved hand. For a moment, the frozen ground appears beneath the white blanket. He nods quietly. The earth is firm. That matters. In many parts of early America, frozen ground actually made travel easier than muddy autumn roads. Once the soil hardened beneath weeks of cold weather, heavy sleds could glide across places where wagons would have struggled only months before. Winter closed some paths. It quietly opened others. Picture yourself standing beside a simple wooden sled. Unlike a wagon with its narrow wheels, the sled rests upon long wooden runners that spread its weight over the snow. Iron strips attached beneath the runners help reduce wear while allowing smoother movement across frozen ground. The horse waits patiently. Its breath rises in soft clouds. Leather harnesses creak gently as they are adjusted. Small brass bells, polished long ago, hang beneath the collar. When the horse begins to walk, the bells produce a peaceful rhythm that carries through the crisp winter air. Those gentle sounds often became a kind of reassurance. If travelers heard distant bells, they knew someone else was nearby. In a world where snow erased roads and landmarks alike, The sound of another sled could bring quiet comfort. Imagine traveling across open country where no visible road exists. How would you know where to go? The answer was rarely found beneath your feet. Instead, it lived within memory. Families learned the landscape the way sailors learned the sea. They remembered unusual hills. They recognized lonely oak trees standing apart from the forest. They followed streams whose courses remained familiar even beneath ice. Church steeples rose above snowy fields like silent guides. Smoke from distant chimneys hinted that another home lay just beyond the next rise. Experienced travelers did not depend upon roads alone. They depended upon knowing the land itself. This knowledge was passed from one generation to the next. A father might point toward a cluster of pine trees and quietly tell his son, "When you see those trees, keep the frozen creek on your left." Such simple instructions could remain useful for decades. Maps certainly existed, but many ordinary farming families relied more upon lived experience than carefully drawn charts. You find yourself riding beside an older farmer as the sled glides across the snow. There is little conversation. The runners whisper softly over packed drifts. The horse moves with steady confidence. From time to time, the farmer studies the wind. Fresh snow blowing across the fields can quickly erase even the faintest tracks. He understands that returning home safely will require just as much attention as leaving. Imagine passing another traveler. Both sleds slow. Greetings are exchanged warmly, despite the cold. Questions follow naturally. How deep is the snow near the mill? Has the bridge held? Did you hear whether the doctor reached the Thompson family? Such conversations were more than friendly exchanges. They formed a living network of information that helped entire communities survive. Without newspapers arriving quickly or telephones connecting distant homes, every traveler carried valuable news. A simple conversation beside a snowy trail could shape another family's decisions for days to come. As the morning slowly arrives in nearby villages, small groups of people begin clearing paths through the deepest drifts. Road maintenance looked very different from what we know today. Many rural communities expected local residents to help keep important roads open whenever possible. Neighbors worked together with wooden shovels, sturdy hands, and patient determination. The task required time. No machine could finish the work in an afternoon. Instead, progress came slowly, one shovel of snow after another. Picture yourself joining them. The air is cold enough to redden cheeks and numb fingers despite thick gloves. The work is steady, but not rushed. Someone pauses to laugh at a friendly remark. Another offers warm cider from a small flask. The rhythm of shared labor makes the task feel lighter. Winter often reminded people that survival was rarely an individual achievement. Communities endured because people helped one another long before anyone asked for payment. As midday approaches, sunlight reflects brightly from the untouched snow. The light is beautiful, but surprisingly strong. Many experienced travelers knew that long hours spent looking across brilliant snow could tire the eyes. Wide-brimmed hats sometimes helped reduce the glare. Others simply rested their eyes whenever possible. Even small details like this became part of practical winter knowledge. Imagine stopping beside a frozen stream. Water still moves quietly beneath its thick layer of ice. The surface appears solid, but appearances could never be trusted completely. Children were taught from an early age to respect frozen water. Adults tested unfamiliar ice carefully before crossing. A stream that seemed safe one week might become dangerous after unexpected weather. Experience encouraged caution. The land rewarded patience. Nearby, evergreen trees remain unchanged by the season. While many deciduous trees stand bare, pines, spruces, and firs continue offering shelter from the wind. Travelers often rested near these forests, where the branches softened the strongest gusts and collected less drifting snow beneath them. Nature itself provided quiet places of refuge for those who understood where to look. Back at the farmhouse, the afternoon settles into familiar routines. The mother carefully checks jars stored in the cellar. Nothing is spoiled. The cool underground air continues protecting precious food supplies. A daughter sits near the window, repairing a wool mitten with patient stitches. Every repaired garment saves valuable material. Nothing useful is wasted. Children gather small pieces of firewood dropped beside the chopping block. Even tiny scraps will help start tomorrow's fire. Winter encourages careful habits that often remain long after spring arrives. As evening approaches, clouds begin turning soft shades of lavender and pale blue. The temperature slowly falls once again. A fox crosses the distant field, leaving a delicate trail of footprints across untouched snow. Before long, fresh wind begins softening those tracks until they almost disappear. Nature quietly erases its own stories. The family gathers around the hearth after supper. The fire burns steadily. Its gentle warmth fills the room with comfort earned through months of preparation. Outside, darkness settles over fields where the roads remain hidden beneath deep snow. Yet inside this humble farmhouse, there is no feeling of hopelessness, only patience, only quiet confidence built upon experience. These families understood something that modern life sometimes allows us to forget. Not every problem must be solved immediately. Some challenges are met one careful day at a time, one fire to tend, one meal to prepare, one neighbor to help, one peaceful sunrise after another. And as the stars slowly appear above the sleeping countryside, another chapter of winter quietly waits beyond the horizon. Soon, we will discover how letters, medicine, and urgent messages still found their way across a landscape where the roads themselves had disappeared beneath the snow. Imagine another quiet dawn unfolding across the winter countryside. The storm has long since passed, yet its work remains. Snow still lies deep upon the fields, softening every fence line and covering every familiar bend in the road. The world seems peaceful, almost untouched, as though time itself has slowed beneath the weight of winter. Inside the farmhouse, the family wakes before sunrise. No alarm clock calls them from sleep. Instead, years of habit guide each person gently into another day. A small flame is coaxed back to life from the glowing embers that rested beneath the ashes overnight. Dry kindling catches first, followed by carefully split logs that begin to crackle softly. Soon, the room fills with a comforting warmth and the familiar scent of seasoned oak. You find yourself sitting near the hearth, watching quiet movements that have been repeated through countless winters. Someone stirs a pot of oatmeal over the fire. Someone else folds blankets before opening the shutters, just enough to welcome the pale morning light. Outside, the air is perfectly still. Fresh snow sparkles beneath a sky of gentle blue. The road remains hidden. Yet today is different. Today, someone must travel. Not because they wish to, because they must. Perhaps an elderly neighbor has become ill. Perhaps a family is running low on salt, one of the most valuable supplies in winter. Perhaps an important letter is waiting several miles away. In early America, winter did not pause the needs of daily life. It only made meeting those needs more difficult. Picture yourself helping prepare the sled. A thick wool blanket is folded neatly inside. Extra mittens are tucked beneath the seat. A small bundle of food is packed with quiet care. Travelers often carried simple meals that would not spoil in the cold. A loaf of coarse bread, smoked meat, a wedge of hard cheese, perhaps a small pouch of dried apples gathered the previous autumn. These humble foods offered strength without requiring a fire to prepare. The horse is brushed carefully before the harness is fitted. Snow clings to its winter coat. Its ears turn toward the familiar voices of the family. The animal has traveled these routes before. Experience belongs not only to people. Well-trained horses often remembered paths through the countryside, especially those they had followed many times. Their calm instincts sometimes proved just as valuable as human judgment. Imagine the sled beginning its quiet journey. The runners glide across firm snow with a gentle whisper. The only steady sounds are the horse's breathing, the soft ringing of harness bells, and the occasional creak of wood adjusting to the cold. The air feels wonderfully clean. Each breath carries the scent of pine, frozen earth, and distant fireplaces. Smoke rises from scattered farmhouses, each one a small reminder that other families are beginning their own winter mornings. Travel during winter required constant awareness. Snowdrifts could change overnight. A familiar shortcut across an open field might suddenly become difficult after strong winds. Frozen streams that seemed perfectly safe last week deserve to be tested again today. Experience taught travelers to respect winter rather than challenge it. Patience remained their greatest companion. As the morning slowly arrives, you notice small signs of life scattered across the quiet landscape. Rabbit tracks weave between bushes. A red fox pauses near the edge of the woods before disappearing among the trees. High above, a flock of crows circles slowly, their dark shapes standing out against the bright sky. Wild animals continued their own search for food throughout the season. Many families quietly observed these creatures, learning from their movements and respecting the balance of nature that surrounded them. After several peaceful miles, the sled approaches a small wooden bridge. The creek beneath is mostly frozen, though a narrow ribbon of moving water still slips quietly between sheets of ice. The traveler guides the horse carefully. Bridges always deserved attention during winter. Snow could hide damaged boards. Ice could make every surface slippery. No one hurried across. Safe journeys were built from careful choices rather than quick ones. On the far side of the bridge stands a modest meeting house. During warmer months, neighbors gathered here regularly. Winter changed those gatherings. Deep snow often kept many families at home. Yet whenever weather allowed, people still made remarkable efforts to come together. Faith, friendship, and shared responsibility remained important parts of community life. Sometimes these meetings became opportunities to exchange supplies or news. Sometimes they simply reminded people that they were not facing the long season alone. You find yourself entering the warm building. Coats dusted with snow hang beside the entrance. Faces reddened by the cold gradually relax near the stove. Conversations remain gentle. Someone asks about an elderly widow living several miles away. Another offers to deliver flour during the next journey. A local craftsman agrees to repair a broken tool before spring. These simple promises strengthened entire communities. Winter revealed how deeply neighbors depended upon one another. Imagine a child quietly handing a folded letter to a traveler. There is no official postal carrier visiting every remote farmhouse each day. Instead, letters often reached their destination through trusted friends, merchants, ministers, or anyone traveling in the right direction. News moved slowly. Sometimes, a message written in one town required weeks before reaching another family. No one expected immediate replies. Patience shaped communication just as surely as it shaped travel. Each letter carried great value. The paper itself was precious. Ink was used carefully. Every sentence mattered. Back at the farmhouse, the afternoon unfolds peacefully. The mother checks the bread rising near the warm hearth. A grandfather sits by the window, carving a small wooden toy for the youngest child. His knife moves slowly and confidently, guided by hands that have spent decades working with timber. The child watches with quiet fascination. Skills like these were often passed from one generation to the next without formal lessons. Children learned simply by watching, listening, and helping whenever they could. Outside, the sky gradually begins to change. Thin clouds drift across the afternoon sun. The light grows softer. A faint breeze carries loose snow across the open fields, creating delicate ribbons that dance just above the surface. The road disappears once again beneath these shifting drifts. Nature is quietly reshaping the landscape. As evening approaches, the traveler finally returns. The family hears the familiar bells before the sled comes into view. The horse walks steadily into the yard. Its coat is dusted with fine snow. The journey has been successful. The letter has been delivered. Medicine has been collected for a neighbor. A small sack of salt rests safely in the sled. These may seem like ordinary accomplishments. Yet during an American winter, when roads vanished beneath deep snow, they represented patience, courage, and careful planning. After supper, the family gathers once more around the fire. The room glows with gentle candlelight. Outside, stars begin filling the clear winter sky. Without the bright lights of modern towns, the heavens appear astonishingly vivid. Countless stars stretch from horizon to horizon. Many travelers learn to recognize familiar constellations, not only for their beauty, but also as quiet companions during long winter journeys. The youngest children soon drift into sleep. The older ones continue listening as their grandparents recall winters from many years before. Some stories speak of unusually deep snow. Others remember blizzards that lasted for days. Yet every story carries the same quiet lesson: preparation, kindness, patience. Together, they allowed ordinary families to endure extraordinary seasons. The fire settles into glowing embers once again. Outside, the hidden roads rest silently beneath another peaceful blanket of snow. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, but also new opportunities to witness the quiet strength that shaped early American life. And with the coming dawn, we will follow those who faced the greatest risk of all, the doctors, midwives, and messengers who answered urgent calls, even when winter had erased every road before them. Imagine the first light of another winter morning touching the frozen landscape. The snow-covered fields remain quiet, almost motionless. The trees stand bare against the pale sky, their branches holding small layers of frost that sparkle when the sunlight reaches them. A thin trail of smoke rises from distant chimneys, showing that other families have already begun their daily routines. Inside the farmhouse, the fire is rebuilt once again. The winter rhythm continues. Wood must be carried, animals must be fed, meals must be prepared. But today, there is a different feeling in the home. A message has arrived. Someone nearby needs help. Perhaps a child has fallen ill. Perhaps a mother is preparing for childbirth. Perhaps an elderly neighbor requires medicine that cannot wait until spring. In a world where roads could vanish beneath snow, these moments carried a special weight. You find yourself standing beside a traveler preparing to leave. He is not a soldier. He is not a famous explorer. He is an ordinary person answering a simple request from another human being. This quiet kind of bravery was common throughout rural America. People often traveled through difficult conditions because someone else was depending on them. The traveler checks his supplies carefully: a small lantern, a wool blanket, a flask of warm drink, basic tools, perhaps a pouch containing medicine prepared by a local doctor or apothecary. Nothing is excessive. Every item has a purpose. Winter travel demanded simplicity. Anything unnecessary only added weight. Picture yourself watching as the horse begins pulling the sled away from the farmhouse. The family stands at the doorway for a moment. No dramatic farewell takes place. Only a few quiet words. A reminder to return safely. A prayer for good weather. A promise that someone will keep the fire burning until the traveler comes home. The sled slowly disappears into the snowy distance. The road is invisible. But the traveler is not truly lost. He knows the landscape. He knows where the hills rise. He knows where the trees become thicker. He knows where a small cabin stands near the edge of the forest. These places become invisible markers in a world covered with white. Imagine traveling through this winter landscape. The snow reflects the morning light so brightly that the entire countryside seems endless. There are no painted signs beside the path. No road numbers, no traffic sounds. Only nature and memory guide the way. A traveler might follow a line of fence posts buried halfway beneath snow. He might recognize a particular bend in a frozen creek. He might notice that the wind feels different near a valley. To modern eyes, these details may seem small, but to people living closely with the land, they were meaningful signs. The environment itself was a map. As the journey continues, the traveler reaches a small settlement. Several homes sit close together, offering protection from harsh winds. The settlement may have a blacksmith, a general store, a church, or a small workshop. During difficult winters, these places became important centers of community life. A store was not only a place to buy goods, it was where people exchanged news. A blacksmith did more than repair tools. He helped maintain the equipment needed for survival. A church was not only a place of worship, it was also a gathering place where people remembered they belonged to something larger than their own household. You find yourself entering the small store. The door opens with a familiar wooden creak. Warm air escapes from inside. The smell of dried herbs, leather, grain, and smoke fills the room. Shelves hold carefully arranged supplies. Barrels contain flour and salted goods. Small jars contain items that families cannot easily produce themselves. A few neighbors stand nearby discussing the weather. They are not surprised that winter has made travel difficult. They have expected this. Their lives have always included uncertainty. Yet they have also included solutions. A farmer offers to lend a pair of snowshoes. A merchant sets aside supplies for a family unable to travel. A neighbor shares information about a safer route across the valley. Small acts of assistance quietly connect the entire community. As the morning slowly arrives, the traveler continues toward the sick neighbor's home. The distance is not measured only in miles. It is measured in effort. A journey that might take an hour during summer could require an entire day in winter. Snow changed time itself. People learned not to judge distance by ordinary measurements. They judged it by conditions. A hill, a frozen stream, a field exposed to wind, a forest where snow accumulated deeply. Each feature affected the journey. Picture yourself arriving at the small farmhouse at the edge of the woods. The chimney smoke is thin but steady. A dog barks softly before recognizing the visitor. The door opens quickly. Inside, the atmosphere is warm and relieved. The arrival of help brings comfort before a single word is spoken. This was one of the greatest strengths of rural winter communities. People understood that survival depended not only on supplies, but also on relationships. A person with plenty of food, but no one willing to help, could still face hardship. A family with fewer resources but strong neighbors often had a better chance of enduring difficult seasons. Winter revealed the importance of connection. The doctor, or helper, spends time caring for the family. The work is calm and patient. There are no modern hospitals nearby, no emergency vehicles waiting outside. Care happens inside ordinary homes, often beside the same fireplaces where families cook and sleep. Many early American doctors traveled great distances under challenging conditions. Their work required knowledge, endurance, and willingness to enter uncertain environments. Midwives, too, played an essential role. They often traveled between homes, assisting mothers through childbirth in an era before modern medical technology. Their experience and practical knowledge were deeply respected within their communities. Imagine a midwife walking through snow toward a distant farmhouse. Her bag is simple. Her journey is difficult. Yet she goes because another family needs her. These stories rarely appear in grand histories. They belong to everyday life. But everyday life is where much of history truly happened. As afternoon approaches, the traveler begins the return journey. The sky has become darker earlier than expected. Winter days are short. The sun begins lowering toward the horizon, while the landscape turns shades of blue and gray. This is the moment when experience matters most. Travelers know that darkness changes everything. Familiar landmarks become harder to recognize. Snow reflects less light. the safest decision may be to stop before reaching home. Many travelers carried knowledge of nearby shelters. A farmhouse, a barn, a church building, a small cabin. In winter, an unexpected overnight stay was not considered an inconvenience. It was often the wise choice. Nature demanded respect. Back at the original farmhouse, the family waits beside the fire. The children listen for the sound of bells. The mother occasionally looks toward the window. Outside, the wind begins moving snow across the yard. The world becomes quiet again. Then, faintly in the distance, a sound, a familiar rhythm, the gentle ringing of bells. The traveler has returned. The door opens. Cold air enters briefly. Then warmth returns. The journey is complete. Another winter day has passed. Another challenge has been met. The family settles into the evening, knowing that tomorrow may bring more snow, more obstacles, and more moments requiring patience. But they also know something important. A lost road does not mean a lost connection. Even when winter covered the paths between homes, people continued finding ways to reach one another. And as the fire burned softly through the night, our journey continues toward another hidden part of winter survival. The remarkable ways families stored food, protected their homes, and prepared for the months when the outside world seemed almost unreachable. Imagine the winter night, growing deeper across the American countryside. The stars shine above a landscape that appears almost endless. Snow covers the fields, the forests, and the forgotten paths between distant homes. The roads that once guided wagons through the countryside have become invisible beneath layers of frozen white. Yet inside the farmhouse, life continues. The fire glows softly. The wooden walls hold the warmth that has been carefully created throughout the day. A kettle hangs above the flames, releasing gentle waves of steam into the room. The family has learned that surviving winter is not only about enduring the cold outside, it is about creating comfort inside. You find yourself looking around the room. Every object tells a story of preparation. The thick wool blankets were not purchased quickly from a nearby store. They may have been woven from wool, gathered, cleaned, spun, and crafted through many hours of work. The wooden shelves holding jars of preserved food were built by someone in the family or by a neighbor whose skills were valued by the entire community. The iron tools near the fireplace were shaped by a blacksmith whose workshop might have served families for miles around. Winter survival was built from many small efforts. Long before the snow arrived, families spent months preparing for the moment when roads disappeared. Picture yourself returning to the previous autumn. The fields are no longer white. The air is cool but pleasant. Leaves have begun changing color. Farm families know that winter is approaching, even though the days still feel comfortable. This is the season of preparation. The harvest is gathered carefully. Corn is collected and stored. Beans are dried. Root vegetables are placed into dark, cool cellars beneath homes. Apples are turned into sauce, cider, or preserved slices. Every item stored represents a decision about the future. A family does not simply ask, "What do we need today?" They ask, "What will we need when we cannot easily travel tomorrow?" This way of thinking shaped rural life. Nothing was wasted because everything could become important during a long winter. Imagine walking into a smokehouse behind a farmhouse. The air carries a deep, rich scent of burning wood. Meat hangs carefully from wooden beams above a slow fire. Smoke rises gently over many hours, preserving food that will feed the family long after fresh hunting and farming become difficult. This process required patience. Too much heat could damage the meat. Too little smoke might fail to protect it. Generations learned these methods through experience. The knowledge was not written in manuals. It lived in practiced hands. Inside another part of the home, jars line wooden shelves. The glass catches the dim light from a nearby candle. Inside are fruits and vegetables saved from warmer months. Preserving food was one of the most important skills for families living far from markets. During winter, a road covered by snow could separate a household from outside supplies for weeks. A well-prepared pantry meant independence. It meant security. It meant peace of mind. As the first heavy snowfalls arrived, families began changing their daily habits. Travel became something to consider carefully. A short trip required planning. A visit to a neighbor involved checking the weather. A journey to town might be delayed until conditions improved. Winter encouraged people to slow down. The season created a different rhythm of life. Picture yourself inside the farmhouse during a storm. The wind moves around the corners of the building. Snow taps softly against the window. The outside world feels distant. But inside there is activity. Someone repairs a broken chair. Someone sharpens a tool. Someone spins wool into thread. Someone reads beside the fire. Winter evenings were not empty. They were filled with useful work. Many families used these months to complete tasks that were difficult during the busy farming seasons. Clothing was repaired. Wooden objects were crafted. Stories were shared. Skills were taught. The long evenings became a classroom where younger generations learned from older ones. A child watching a parent repair a harness was learning more than a simple task. They were learning how to solve problems. They were learning patience. They were learning that objects had value because human effort created them. Imagine a young child sitting beside a grandparent while snow falls outside. The grandparent tells stories of earlier winters. Not stories of heroes or famous people, stories of ordinary families. A winter when neighbors shared firewood. A storm when travelers found shelter. A year when crops were poor, but communities supported one another. These memories became part of family history. They reminded younger generations that difficult seasons could be survived. As the winter continues, one of the greatest concerns remains fuel. Food could be stored. Clothing could be repaired. But warmth required constant attention. Firewood was among the most important resources a family possessed. During warmer months, people cut and stacked enough wood to last through the cold season. The work was exhausting. Trees had to be chosen carefully. They had to be cut, split, carried, and protected from moisture. A tall stack of firewood beside the home represented countless hours of labor. Every evening when a log was placed into the fire, a family was using the work of previous months. You find yourself standing beside the woodpile. Snow covers the top layer. Each piece is different. Some logs burn quickly and provide immediate heat. Others burn slowly through the night. Experienced families knew which wood to use and when. Small decisions like these made a difference. The same careful thinking applied to clothing. Winter clothing was not simply a matter of fashion. It was protection. Wool was especially valuable because it could retain warmth, even when damp. Multiple layers helped trap body heat. Mittens protected hands. Heavy boots protected feet from freezing temperatures. Many garments were repaired repeatedly because making new ones required time and materials. A coat might serve one person for years and later be altered for another family member. Clothing carried memories: a repaired sleeve, a patched knee, a faded piece of fabric. Each mark showed that the item had been useful. As evening falls again, the farmhouse becomes a small island of warmth, surrounded by a frozen world. The family eats together. The conversation is quiet. Tomorrow's weather remains unknown. The road remains hidden, but the home remains prepared. Outside, snow continues covering the countryside. Inside, knowledge, tradition, and careful planning keep life moving. And slowly, another truth becomes clear. The people who lived through these winters did not survive because they had an easy life. They survived because they understood their environment. They respected the seasons. They prepared before difficulties arrived. They trusted their neighbors. They learned from those who came before them. The lost winter roads were only one challenge. Beyond them waited another question. How did families communicate, trade, and stay connected when weeks of snow could separate one community from another? As the next winter morning approaches, we will follow the hidden networks of paths, messengers, and relationships that kept isolated families connected, even when the landscape seemed completely closed. Imagine the winter morning arriving quietly over the American countryside once again. The darkness slowly fades, and a soft gray light spreads across the snow-covered fields. The world outside appears unchanged. The fences are still buried beneath snow. The narrow roads are still hidden. The trees remain covered in frost, standing like silent guardians over the frozen land. But inside the farmhouse, another day begins. The fire is rebuilt. The kettle is placed near the flames. The family continues with the same steady rhythm that has carried them through countless winter mornings. Yet beyond this single home, another story is unfolding, a story of connection. Because even when roads disappeared, communities did not disappear with them. People still needed one another. Farmers needed supplies. Families needed news. Doctors needed to reach patients. Merchants needed to move goods. Letters needed to travel. The challenge was finding a way through a landscape that seemed determined to hide every path. You find yourself standing at the edge of a snowy trail. There is no clear road ahead. Only a quiet line of packed snow where travelers have passed before. This trail was not marked by signs. It was remembered. A person walking here might know exactly where to turn because they had traveled this way many times. In early America, memory was often one of the most valuable tools a person carried. Picture yourself following an experienced winter traveler. He does not look down searching for tracks. The snow has already covered them. Instead, he looks outward. He watches the shape of the land, a hill rising gently on the left, a group of tall trees ahead, a small stream crossing the valley. These details guide him. The landscape speaks a language that he understands. For many rural families, Knowing the land was as important as knowing how to farm. The same fields that provided food during summer became guides during winter. The same forests that supplied timber became landmarks during storms. Nature was both a challenge and a companion. As the morning continues, imagine a small settlement preparing for visitors. The general store opens its wooden door. The blacksmith begins warming his workshop. The church bell rings softly across the cold air. In many communities, the sound of a bell carried farther during winter because the frozen landscape absorbed less movement and activity. A distant sound could travel across fields that were otherwise completely silent. The bell became a familiar voice in the winter landscape. People knew where they were by sounds as much as by sights. The ringing of a church bell, the hammer of a blacksmith, the creaking wheels of a wagon, the bells of a passing sled. Each sound connected people to the world around them. Inside the village store, neighbors gather. The room is warmer than outside, though the wooden walls still allow the cold to remain nearby. A small stove provides comfort. Shelves hold everyday necessities: flour, salt, fabric, tools. Candles, simple items that helped families continue their lives. But the store offers something else that cannot be measured: information. A farmer from several miles away brings news. A traveler shares what he saw along the road. Someone mentions that a certain bridge is unsafe. Someone else explains that the northern trail has become easier to cross. Information moves from person to person. The community itself becomes a communication network. Imagine living in a time before instant messages, phones, and online maps. A piece of news might travel slowly, but it traveled because people carried it. A neighbor remembered it. A merchant repeated it. A traveler shared it. A letter was passed from hand to hand. Human connection carried information across the snow. This system was not fast, but it was dependable. People understood that everyone played a role. You find yourself watching a mail carrier preparing for a winter route. The job requires patience and determination. Mail carriers during the 19th century often faced difficult conditions, especially in rural areas where roads were poorly developed. Snow, ice, and storms could delay deliveries. Yet communities depended upon these routes. A letter from a distant relative, a business document, a newspaper containing news from other states. Each delivery connected isolated homes to a larger world. The mail carrier checks his equipment carefully. The horse is prepared. The bags are secured. The journey begins. The route may not look like a road anymore, but the destination remains clear. Along the way, familiar homes become places of temporary safety. If weather becomes dangerous, a traveler may stop and wait. Offering shelter to someone caught in a storm was considered an important responsibility. A warm room and a simple meal could mean the difference between hardship and survival. Hospitality was not only kindness. In winter, it was part of community safety. Picture yourself inside a small farmhouse as an unexpected visitor arrives after sunset. Snow covers his coat. His boots leave wet marks near the doorway. The family does not ask many questions before inviting him inside. A chair is moved closer to the fire. A bowl of warm food is prepared. Blankets are offered. The visitor may stay only one night, but that one night represents something larger. It shows that people understood their lives were connected. Anyone could become the person needing help tomorrow. As winter continues, trade also adapts. Farmers who could not easily reach distant markets found other ways to exchange goods. Local trading became especially important. A neighbor might provide eggs in exchange for grain. A craftsman might repair tools for food. A farmer might share firewood with someone who had fallen behind. Money was useful. But during difficult seasons, relationships often carried even greater value. The winter landscape encouraged cooperation. You find yourself returning to the farmhouse in the evening. The family sits together after a full day. A small candle burns near the window. Its flame moves gently whenever cold air finds its way through tiny gaps in the wooden frame. Outside, snow begins falling again. The road will likely disappear even more by morning. But tonight, the family feels connected. A neighbor stopped by earlier. A letter arrived from relatives several towns away. A traveler brought news from the village. The world beyond their home may be covered in snow, but it is not unreachable. Slowly, the night becomes deeper. The fire burns lower. The family prepares for sleep. Tomorrow will bring another winter challenge. Perhaps another storm. Perhaps another journey. Perhaps another reminder that survival depended not on defeating winter, but on understanding it. And as the quiet countryside rests beneath the stars, we will continue exploring the hidden skills that helped American families protect their homes from the deepest cold. How they built, repaired, and adapted their houses to survive seasons when the outside world seemed frozen and distant. Imagine the winter night slowly giving way to another cold morning. The first rays of sunlight touch the snow-covered roofs of rural American homes. The fields remain silent, and the roads are still hidden beneath layers of snow. Yet inside these houses, life has already begun. The fire is burning. The animals are being cared for. The morning meal is being prepared. For families living through long winters, the home was more than a place to sleep. It was a shelter carefully designed through generations of experience. You find yourself standing outside a small wooden farmhouse. At first glance, it may appear simple. The walls are plain. The windows are small. The roof shows signs of many seasons. But every part of the house has a purpose. The builders understood that winter was not an occasional visitor. It was a force that had to be respected every year. Picture yourself walking closer. The house sits with careful attention to its surroundings. Many early settlers chose locations where natural features offered protection. A hill might block strong winds. A line of trees might reduce the force of winter storms. A nearby water source might provide access even when travel became difficult. The placement of a home could influence how comfortable and safe a family remained during the cold months. Long before modern heating systems, people relied on thoughtful design. The fireplace stood at the heart of many homes. It provided warmth. It allowed cooking. It offered light during long evenings. The fire was not simply an object inside the house. It was part of daily survival. Imagine waking in the middle of a freezing night. The room is dark. The fire has become only glowing embers. Someone quietly rises, adds small pieces of wood, and patiently brings the warmth back. A small mistake could mean losing precious heat. Keeping the fire alive was a responsibility shared by everyone. Children learned early that warmth required care. Adults understood that a comfortable home depended upon constant attention. You find yourself entering the kitchen area. The smell of yesterday's meal still lingers. Dried herbs hang near the wall. Wooden shelves hold carefully stored supplies. Iron cookware rests beside the hearth. During winter, kitchens became some of the busiest places in the home. Food preparation took time. Without modern appliances, nearly every step required human effort. Grinding grain, preparing vegetables, maintaining stored food, heating water, cooking meals. Yet these routines created a familiar rhythm. The work was demanding, but it also brought people together. Picture a family gathered around the table during a snowy evening. The youngest children listen while older family members talk. Someone repairs a tool. Someone prepares tomorrow's clothing. Someone tells a story remembered from another winter. The house is filled not with noise, but with gentle activity. Winter evenings created moments for families to spend time together. The long darkness outside encouraged a different pace of life. There was less rushing, more conversation, more teaching, more remembering. As the night continues, the cold outside becomes stronger. Wind moves around the corners of the farmhouse. Snow presses against the windows. But inside, several simple methods help protect the family from the weather. Heavy curtains reduce drafts. Wool blankets hold warmth. Straw or cloth may be used around gaps where cold air enters. Floors covered with rugs provide some protection from frozen ground. These small details mattered. A home did not need to be large to be comfortable. It needed to be carefully maintained. Imagine the work required before winter arrived. Families inspected their roofs. They repaired cracks in walls. They strengthened doors. They checked windows. Every small repair completed before the first major storm made the coming months easier. Preparation was not only about storing food. It was about protecting the place where that food would be used. You find yourself traveling back to the months before snow covered the land. Farmers and families are preparing their homes while autumn leaves fall around them. Someone replaces damaged boards on the barn. Someone seals spaces between wooden walls. Someone gathers extra blankets. The air is cool, but winter still feels distant. Yet experienced families know that the season can arrive quickly. A sudden storm could transform the countryside within hours. Those who prepared early had greater peace of mind. As the first snow arrives, the changes become obvious. Outdoor work decreases. Indoor responsibilities increase. The house becomes a workshop, a classroom, a gathering place, a refuge. Many families used winter evenings for skills that supported everyday life: spinning thread, making candles, repairing clothing, building small wooden items, maintaining tools. These activities were not hobbies. They were necessary parts of survival. Picture yourself watching someone create a candle. The process requires time. Wax must be prepared. The wick must be positioned carefully. The finished candle may appear simple, but each one represents effort. Light was precious during winter evenings. Before modern electricity, families carefully managed every source of illumination. A candle was not something to waste. A lamp was used thoughtfully. Darkness was accepted as part of the season. People adapted their routines around it. The arrival of evening meant a gradual slowing down. The outside world became quiet. The family moved closer to the fire. Stories replaced outdoor activities. Rest replaced labor. Winter created a natural pause. You find yourself listening to the sounds of the farmhouse, the soft movement of someone walking across wooden floors, the gentle crackle of burning logs, the occasional sound of wind outside, the quiet breathing of sleeping animals nearby. These sounds formed the background of everyday winter life. For many families, this was normal. Not easy, not always comfortable, but familiar. As the season continued, another challenge appeared. Clothing. Keeping a family warm required constant care. A torn coat could not simply be replaced with a quick purchase. Fabric was valuable. Repairs were expected. Children often inherited clothing from older siblings. Garments were adjusted, patched, and reused. A piece of clothing could carry years of memories. A coat might have traveled through several winters. A blanket might have covered multiple generations. Objects lasted because people respected the work behind them. Imagine holding a handmade quilt. Every piece of fabric has a history. Perhaps one section came from an old dress, another from a worn shirt, another from leftover cloth saved carefully. Together, these pieces became something greater. A quilt was not only warmth, it was a record of family life. As evening returns once more, the farmhouse glows against the darkness. The windows shine softly through the falling snow. The road outside has vanished again. But inside, the family remains safe. The home has done what it was built to do: protect, comfort, provide a place where life can continue. Yet even the strongest home could not solve every winter problem. There were moments when families had to leave their shelter, moments when they needed supplies, help, or news from distant places. And when those moments arrived, they depended on another remarkable skill: the ability to travel across frozen landscapes using methods that seem almost forgotten today. As the next chapter begins, we will follow the winter travelers who crossed mountains, forests, and open fields when ordinary roads had disappeared completely. Imagine the winter morning arriving over a landscape transformed by snow. The familiar countryside has become something almost new. Fields that once held crops now appear as wide, open stretches of white. Wooden fences rise only a short distance above the snow. Small paths between homes have vanished completely. Even places that families have known for years can look unfamiliar when winter covers every detail. Yet people continue moving. They must. Life cannot remain completely still for an entire season. A farmer may need to check distant livestock. A merchant may need to deliver supplies. A doctor may need to answer a call for help. A family member may need to visit a neighbor. Winter creates obstacles, but it also creates new ways of traveling. You find yourself standing beside a wooden sled at the edge of a farmhouse. The morning air is sharp and clear. The horse's breath rises like small clouds. The leather harness is cold beneath gloved hands. The traveler checks every strap carefully before beginning the journey. In winter, preparation begins before the first step. A loose harness or damaged runner could turn a simple trip into a dangerous situation. The sled itself represents an important adaptation. During warmer months, wagons with wooden wheels carried people and goods across dirt roads. But winter changed the landscape. Wheels struggled against deep snow. Sled runners, however, moved smoothly over frozen surfaces. The same season that closed roads also created different paths. Picture yourself sitting on the sled as it begins to move. The wooden runners glide quietly. Snow falls gently from tree branches as the horse passes beneath them. The forest feels peaceful. There is no sound of engines, no crowded roads, only the steady rhythm of movement through nature. Travelers learn to appreciate this quiet world while remaining aware of its dangers. The beauty of winter could hide serious risks. A sudden storm could erase tracks. A wrong turn could lead someone away from shelter. Cold temperatures could become dangerous after long exposure. Experience taught travelers to respect distance. A place that looked nearby could still require hours of difficult travel. As the sled continues, the traveler looks toward familiar landmarks. A large oak tree stands near the edge of a field. A rocky hill rises beyond the valley. A line of pine trees marks the direction toward the next settlement. These features guide the journey. Before modern navigation tools, people developed a deep understanding of their surroundings. They noticed details that others might ignore: the shape of a hill, the direction of the sun, the movement of clouds, the sound of nearby water, the behavior of animals. The land itself provided information. Imagine a family living near a forest during a particularly harsh winter. Their nearest neighbor may be several miles away. During summer, that distance feels manageable. During winter, it becomes a serious journey. The family does not simply decide to visit. They consider everything. Is the weather changing? Is there enough daylight? Is the trail safe? Do we have proper clothing? Do we need extra food? Winter travel required planning because mistakes could become dangerous quickly. You find yourself entering a small, wooded path. Snow rests heavily on branches above. The trees reduce some of the wind, creating a calmer passage. Many travelers preferred forest routes because open fields exposed them to stronger winds and drifting snow. Nature offered both challenges and protection. Those who understood the environment knew where to find safety. As the journey continues, the traveler reaches a place where several paths meet. During summer, this might simply be an ordinary crossroads. During winter, it becomes an important meeting point. Travelers often shared information here: which routes were open, which bridges were safe, which families needed assistance, which areas had received the deepest snow. A person traveling in one direction could provide knowledge that helped someone traveling in another. Winter communities survived partly because information moved with people. Picture yourself hearing distant bells. Another sled approaches. Two travelers stop beside each other. They exchange greetings. They ask about the road ahead. The conversation may last only a few minutes, but those minutes are valuable. A warning about dangerous ice. A suggestion for a safer route. News about a nearby family. Small pieces of information help many people. The winter landscape may seem empty, but it is filled with quiet connections. As afternoon approaches, the traveler reaches a frozen river. During summer, this river separates communities. During winter, when conditions are safe, it can become a temporary route. Frozen waterways sometimes allowed people to travel more directly than roads around them, but crossing ice required great caution. Not every frozen surface was trustworthy. Thickness could vary. Moving water beneath the ice could create weak areas. Experienced travelers tested conditions carefully and avoided unnecessary risks. They understood that confidence and care had to exist together. Imagine standing beside the frozen river. The surface stretches quietly into the distance. Snow covers much of the ice. The river seems asleep. But beneath that frozen surface, water continues moving. Winter often created landscapes that looked still while remaining active underneath. This reminded people to remain humble before nature. After crossing safely, the traveler continues toward the distant settlement. The sun begins lowering. Winter afternoons are short. The golden light fades quickly. This is when travelers become especially aware of time. They know darkness changes everything. Familiar landmarks become harder to recognize. Snow reflects less light. Temperatures drop. A journey planned carefully during daylight can become much more difficult after sunset. So travelers often measured progress not only by distance, but by remaining sunlight. You find yourself approaching a small farmhouse as evening begins. The owner recognizes the traveler and opens the door. Warm air escapes into the cold. The visitor is welcomed inside. This simple moment represents something deeply important in early American winter life. A home was not only a private space, it was sometimes a place of safety for anyone caught in difficult conditions. A stranger arriving after dark might receive food, warmth, and a place to sleep. Not because everyone had plenty, but because everyone understood vulnerability. Winter could place any person in need. As the evening settles, the traveler shares stories beside the fire. The family listens carefully. They learn about distant places. They hear news from other communities. They discover which roads have reopened and which remain buried. A traveler carried more than supplies. They carried the wider world with them. Outside, snow begins falling again. The landscape slowly changes. The tracks made during the day begin disappearing. The road becomes invisible once more. Yet tomorrow, someone else will travel. Someone else will follow memories, landmarks, and shared knowledge across the same winter landscape. Generation after generation, people learned how to move through a world where nature constantly changed the rules. And as the fire burns quietly through the night, another question waits for us. When winter became especially severe, how did families protect the most vulnerable among them? The children, the elderly, and those who could not easily travel. The answer reveals another important part of survival: the care and cooperation that existed inside winter communities. Imagine the winter morning arriving slowly over the quiet countryside. A soft layer of frost covers the window glass. Outside, the fields remain hidden beneath snow, and the narrow paths between homes have once again disappeared. The world seems peaceful, almost untouched. But inside each farmhouse, families are already thinking about the people who need the most care during this difficult season. Winter survival was never only about keeping food stored or keeping a fire burning. It was also about protecting one another. You find yourself entering a small farmhouse where several generations live together. In many early American households, grandparents, parents, and children shared daily life under one roof. This arrangement was not unusual. It allowed families to combine their skills, knowledge, and strength. The oldest members of the family carried memories of earlier winters. The adults carried the daily responsibilities. The children learned the traditions that would guide them in the future. Each person had a role. Picture yourself sitting near the fireplace during a long winter evening. An elderly grandmother carefully repairs a piece of clothing beside the warm glow of the flames. Her hands move slowly, but her knowledge is valuable. She remembers how food was preserved during difficult years. She remembers which herbs were useful. She remembers stories of storms that arrived before anyone expected them. Her experience is a kind of winter preparation. Before modern weather reports, before detailed forecasts, people depended heavily on the memories of those who had lived through previous seasons. The past helped prepare for the future. Nearby, a young child listens quietly. The child may not understand every detail of the conversation, but over time, these stories become lessons. Which trees burn longest? How to recognize dangerous weather. How to care for animals during extreme cold. How to help neighbors when travel becomes difficult. Knowledge was often passed through ordinary moments. A conversation beside a fire. A walk to the barn. A lesson while repairing a tool. History was taught through daily life. You find yourself looking toward another corner of the home. A mother carefully wraps a child in extra layers before allowing them near the doorway. Children were especially vulnerable during severe winters. Their smaller bodies lost heat more quickly. Their clothing required constant attention because they grew rapidly. Parents watched carefully for signs of illness and made sure children remained warm and protected. Winter changed childhood. Outdoor play became limited during storms. School attendance could become irregular. Yet children still found ways to learn and enjoy the season. Imagine children gathered near a window watching snowfall. They may build small toys from leftover wood. They may listen to stories. They may practice reading beside a candle. They may help with simple household tasks. Winter was not a season without activity. It was simply a season with different activities. As the day continues, the family prepares a meal. The elderly receive assistance. The youngest children are served first. Everyone understands that survival depends on cooperation. A person who cannot perform heavy work still contributes in other ways. An older family member may teach skills. A child may help gather small pieces of wood. Someone with experience may guide decisions. Every person has value. This belief helped many households endure difficult conditions. Picture yourself walking through a small village during a heavy snowfall. The homes are separated by distance, but people remain aware of one another. Smoke rising from a chimney shows that a family is safe inside. A missing column of smoke may cause concern. A quiet home may encourage a neighbor to check in. In close communities, people often noticed changes. They knew who was elderly. They knew who lived alone. They knew which families might need extra assistance. Winter made this awareness especially important. You find yourself following a neighbor carrying a small basket through the snow. Inside are simple supplies, perhaps bread, perhaps preserved vegetables. perhaps firewood gathered from a larger supply. The gift is not large, but during a difficult winter, even small help can matter greatly. Such acts rarely appeared in official records. No monument was built for them. No famous story was written. Yet these quiet actions helped communities survive. The history of winter is also a history of kindness. As afternoon approaches, another challenge appears: illness. Cold weather itself did not create every disease, but winter conditions often made caring for sick people more difficult. Travel was slower. Fresh supplies were harder to obtain. Medical help could be far away. Families relied on whatever knowledge and resources they had. Some treatments came from doctors. Others came from traditional practices passed through generations. Herbal remedies, careful nursing, warmth, rest, and clean surroundings were all important parts of care. Imagine a sick family member resting near the fire. The room is quiet. Someone checks their temperature by touch. Someone prepares warm food. Someone sits nearby through the night. Care was often personal and constant. There were no machines monitoring patients. No instant communication with distant experts. There were only people offering attention and support. And sometimes, that human presence provided comfort, even when solutions were limited. You find yourself returning to the village path as evening approaches. A neighbor walks carefully through the snow carrying a lantern. The light is small, but it guides each step. The journey may be slow. The cold may be uncomfortable, but the purpose is important. Someone needs help. Someone needs company. Someone needs to know they are not forgotten. These journeys represented the quiet strength of winter communities. Not every survival story involved dramatic rescues. Many involved ordinary people simply showing up when they were needed. As darkness settles over the countryside, families close their shutters and return indoors. The wind moves across the fields. Snow covers the paths once again. Yet inside the homes, warmth continues. Not only from fireplaces, from relationships, from shared meals, from stories, from people caring for one another. The lost winter roads may have separated communities physically, but they did not break the connections between people. In many ways, winter revealed the strongest parts of rural American life: patience, responsibility, compassion, the understanding that no family truly survived alone. And as another peaceful night passes beneath the frozen sky, our journey will continue toward the final challenges of winter survival: the unexpected storms, the hardest seasons, and the remarkable endurance that carried families through months when the world outside seemed almost impossible to cross. Imagine the final days of winter arriving slowly over the American countryside. The season that once seemed endless has begun to change. The snow is still deep in places. The roads are still difficult. The mornings are still cold. But something feels different. The sunlight remains a little longer each day. The birds begin returning to the quiet woods. Small streams begin whispering beneath thin layers of ice. The land, which spent months resting beneath snow, is slowly preparing to wake again. You find yourself standing beside the same farmhouse where this journey began. The road that disappeared months earlier is finally beginning to return. At first, it is only a narrow line where the snow has softened. Then, the familiar path becomes visible again. The fence posts rise higher from the melting snow. The wagon tracks slowly reappear. The connection between homes becomes easier once more. But the families who lived through the winter are not the same people they were before the first snowfall. Winter has taught them. It has tested their patience. It has reminded them of the importance of preparation and community. For these families, surviving winter was not about defeating nature. It was about understanding their place within it. Picture yourself walking through the farm as spring approaches. The woodpile beside the house is much smaller now. Months of careful burning have transformed a tall stack of logs into only a few remaining pieces. Each log represents a cold night survived. Each meal prepared. Each morning when the family woke to warmth instead of freezing darkness. The empty space beside the house tells a story of planning, a story of effort, a story of countless hours spent preparing before winter arrived. Inside the farmhouse, the shelves that once held full supplies are beginning to empty. The preserved vegetables are almost gone. The stored fruits are nearly finished. The last pieces of winter food are used carefully. Soon, new crops will grow. Soon, fresh harvests will replace what has been stored. The cycle continues. This was the rhythm of life for many American families. Every season depended on the one before it. Spring depended on winter preparation. Summer depended on spring planting. Autumn depended on summer labor. Winter depended on everything that came before. You find yourself listening to an older family member speaking beside the fire. Another winter has passed. Perhaps it was not the hardest winter they had known. Perhaps it was. But the details will remain. The storm that buried the road, the neighbor who arrived with supplies, the traveler who crossed the snow, the evening stories beside the hearth, the moments of difficulty and the moments of kindness. These memories become part of family history. Long before photographs became common, memories preserved the past. Stories carried experiences from one generation to another. A child who listened beside the fireplace would someday become the person telling those same stories. Imagine that child years later. Perhaps they are now a parent. Perhaps they were explaining to their own children how people once traveled through snow-covered landscapes without modern machines. They describe sled bells ringing across frozen fields. They describe candles glowing during long evenings. They describe neighbors helping each other when roads disappeared. The details may become softer with time, but the lessons remain clear. Preparation matters. Community matters. Patience matters. As the morning slowly arrives over the countryside, the final snow begins melting from the fields. Farmers return to their work. Tools are repaired. Animals are moved toward fresh pastures. The world becomes active again. The silence of winter is replaced by the sounds of a new season. Birdsong, running water, the movement of farm equipment, the voices of people returning to outdoor work. The road, once lost beneath snow, becomes a road again. But perhaps the most important thing winter left behind was not the cleared path. It was the knowledge gained during the months when there was no path at all. Families learned that survival was not only about having enough supplies, it was about having enough wisdom, enough patience, enough cooperation. The people living in these winters understood something that remains true today. Human beings have always adapted. They have faced changing landscapes, uncertain weather, difficult circumstances. And again, they found ways forward. Picture yourself looking back across the snowy fields one final time. The farmhouse stands quietly beneath the morning sun. The chimney still releases a thin line of smoke. The road stretches toward the village. The trees begin showing small signs of new life. The season has changed. The lost winter roads are no longer lost. Yet the story remains. Because beneath every road we travel today, beneath every modern bridge and every cleared highway, there are older paths remembered by people who crossed difficult landscapes with determination and care. Their world moved more slowly. Their journeys took longer. Their challenges were different, but their hopes were familiar. They wanted warmth. They wanted safety. They wanted their families together. They wanted to reach the people who mattered. And even when snow covered every road, they continued finding their way. The winter landscape may have hidden the paths beneath their feet, but it could not hide their courage, their kindness, or their connection to one another. As the final evening of winter settles gently over the countryside, the fire burns softly one more time. The family rests inside the home that protected them through the cold months. Outside, the road waits for spring travelers. The snow slowly disappears. The world begins again. And somewhere, another generation prepares to face another winter, carrying forward the same quiet lessons learned from those who came before. The roads may disappear, the seasons may change, but the human spirit continues finding a way home.